Hello everyone. Let's learn about the request module which will enable us to send HTTP requests to download data from the internet. The default module for processing HTTP requests as part of Python is something which is called as URL lib. Everybody hates that module. Because of that reason, request module is the most commonly used module. It is referred to as HTTP for humans because it is very easy for beginners to understand HTTP protocol details by using request module. Request module requires installation. Installation for this module is automatically covered as part of Anaconda installation for Python. If for some reason you're unable to import the request module, please execute pip install request command on terminal or PowerShell window to install request module. I have a set of slides here which provide examples using request module. Instead of going through the slide deck, I'll be covering these examples using hands-on demo. Please feel free to go through the slide deck on your own time. Download the template notebook file for today's lecture by pausing the lecture video here. Let me go ahead and import the request module by typing in import space request. The first simple demo that I want to cover is for simple string example. I have a URL here. The domain name as part of the URL is my domain, which is www.mshamkumar.com. The remote resource file is hello.txt. This is a hypertext, so you'll be able to click on it. Observe that launched a new browser tab which is sending HTTP GET requests in order to fetch the content of this remote resource and render the content as part of the browser window here. Hello.txt file has text content as hello CS220 /CS319 students. Welcome to my website. Hope you're staying safe and healthy. Let me copy this particular URL. I'm going to define a variable called URL which is going to store string of the URL. We are going to send HTTP GET requests using request module GET function. The GET function takes as argument the URL. So I'm going to type request.get open parenthesis URL close parenthesis. Let me capture the return value into a variable called R. R is going to store the HTTP response object. Let me show you how you can display the content of the HTTP response message. You can use r.text. So let me go ahead and invoke the print function call to display r.text. I'm also going to invoke the type function call to display the type of r.text. Let's execute this cell of code. Observe that we were able to successfully send a HTTP GET request to fetch the remote resource hello.txt's content within the Python program here. r.text print function call here is displaying the content of the remote resource hello.txt file. The type of r.text is going to be string always by default. It is up to us to perform appropriate type conversion. It is essential that you verify status code of HTTP response message S200 before you actually use the HTTP response content using r.text. Let me show you how you can display status code. I'm going to type r.status underscore code within another print function call. That's going to display 200 over here because we already know that we were successfully able to get a proper HTTP response for our HTTP GET request. Let me include an assert statement here, which is most commonly used right after invoking the GET function within the request module. The assert statement is going to include the condition as r.status underscore code equal to 200. Let me go ahead and execute the cell again. That's not going to make any difference. That's because the condition as part of the assert statement evaluates to true. Recall that whenever assert condition evaluates to true, you're going to do nothing and you'll just simply execute the next line of code. Let's say that we have a typo in the URL. I'm going to copy the content from the previous notebook cell and paste it into a new cell. Let me change the remote resource to hello.txt. There is no remote resource called hello.txt within the remote server which is hosting my domain over here. So if I execute this cell of code, that's going to throw assertion error in line number 3. Let me go ahead and display r.status underscore code before the assert statement. Observe that we are getting 404, which is the status code for file not found. Let me go ahead and comment out the assert statement here. You would think that the lines 5 and 6 here will throw an error, but that's not what happens here. Observe that you're getting some output as part of line 5's print function call, and line 6 print function call is still displaying the type of the return value from r.text as string here. This feels like a bunch of gibberish characters, but it is not. It is something which is called as XML. XML format is closely associated with HTML format, which we'll be discussing as part of the next lecture. It is essential that you include the assert statement to verify status code is exactly equal to 200 before you actually use the response content using r.text. Let me show you one more useful function within the request module. The assert statement is so commonly used that request module implemented a function for it. Instead of including this assert statement here, I can invoke the raise underscore for underscore status function by typing r.raise underscore for underscore status. Let me go ahead and execute this cell. Observe that now we are getting HTTP error instead of assertion error. That's because inside the request module, they are explicitly raising HTTP error whenever status code is not equal to 200. This is going to come in very handy for you to avoid typing the entire assert statement over here. Let's move on to the next example, which is going to be enabling us to go through demo for JSON file. Let me go ahead and click on the URL here. The remote resource scores.json over here contains a dictionary. The dictionary keys are player names and the corresponding values are player scores. Let me show you how we can send a GET request to this particular remote resource. I've captured this URL into a variable called URL, and I've typed the request.get function call by passing URL as argument. I'm capturing the return value into a variable called R, and I'm displaying r.text and type of r.text. Let's go ahead and execute this cell. Observe that you're getting the JSON content over here. The type of r.text is going to be string. So if I display r.text directly without using the print function call, you'll be able to see the unformatted output of the string over here. Wouldn't it be nice if we can load the string contents into an appropriate Python data structure which can represent the JSON file format? The load_as function within the JSON module is going to enable us to achieve that purpose. Recall that we have been using the load function within the JSON module, which enables us to take as argument the file object to the JSON file, and it is going to read the content of the JSON file into an appropriate Python data structure. In a similar way, load_as function is going to read string content into an appropriate data structure which represents that particular JSON format. Let me go ahead and import the JSON module by typing in import space JSON. Let's go ahead and take a look at how to use the load_s function for this particular example over here. Let me go ahead and remove the last display of r.text. I'm going to use JSON module load_s function in order to read r.text string variable into an appropriate data structure. I know for a fact that we are going to get a dictionary over here. Let me capture the return value of the load_s function within the JSON module into a variable called d, and I'm going to go ahead and display d here. Let's go ahead and comment out the print function calls in line number 3 and line number 4 to avoid confusion. Observe that we are getting a Python dictionary now, which is the nicely formatted content of the string r.text value here. This is also very commonly used that request module has a shortcut for the load_s function within the JSON module. You can invoke JSON function by typing R, which is the HTTP response object, dot JSON open parenthesis close parenthesis. This is going to enable you to directly obtain the JSON file's content into an appropriate data structure, which is going to be a dictionary in this particular example. Observe that when I execute the cell, we are getting the exact same output. Now we can go ahead and use the dictionary variable in order to access various key value pairs. For example, I could say D of Alice, which is going to retrieve the value as 100 over here. I'll go ahead and wrap up this lecture video here. In the next video, we are going to go through demo problem 1, which will enable us to perform Reddit processing.